Hello everybody, welcome back to another monthly reading wrap up. We're here to talk about the 5 books that I read in the month of April, and I'm excited to talk about them. A couple of them were not my favorites, which is so unfortunate that they were essentially back to back, but I really want to share with you guys everything that I read because I did find a 5-star that I'm obsessed with, and I think it's definitely going to become a new personality trait, so kind of excited. So let's talk about these books. We'll just go in order of how I read them. So we'll start with what I chose as my second pick for my March book of the month. If you're not signed up for book of the month, you absolutely should be. I'll put my referral link down below. When you click it, if you want to sign up, check the top and they have a code. You can put in any code. I think currently right now it's spicy, and you get your first hardcover for $9.99, which is a steal. I even think at some points you may be able to get your first book for $5.99, which is a steal. I love book of the month. It's amazing. I do get a credit if you sign up though under my link, just so you know, just for transparency, but I love book of the month. So I chose 2 books in March, and this was the second book that I had chose. So I started reading it at the end of March, and it kind of trailed into April, and that is the London Seance Society. This is by Sarah Penner. Love the cover. This is gorgeous. So the premise of the London Seance Society, it is about this girl named Lena. There we go. Lena, who has come to Paris because she wants to see this kind of well-known, very esteemed medium named Vaudeline. I don't know how I was saying it in my head the whole time I was reading it, but she's this very esteemed medium who can speak to the dead, and she does these seances, and she's known all around Europe as being very good at what she does. So she goes to this woman in Paris because her sister was just brutally murdered, and she wants to find out who did it. And that's kind of what this woman is known for. She's known for kind of working with the police and being able to identify the killer through these seances. So she goes to Paris. She's from London. And this medium is not trying to go back to London. She's like, nope, something happened. I'm not trying to go back. But then she receives this letter, and it's you need to be in London right now. And someone that she's very close with has passed away and was murdered. So she wants to go back to London then to do a seance to figure out his murderer. So she's like, okay, Lena, let's go. Let's do this seance, and then we'll do your sisters. And Lena's like, great, love that for me. So she's kind of there as her apprentice, as her assistant, learning how to do these seances. There's plenty of steps, things like that. And then there is this London Seance Society who Vaudeline and Lena are working with, because that was the person that died, is the person that was in charge of that. So the story kind of trails from there. You're kind of finding out bits and pieces. She's going around trying to piece everything together before she actually does these seances. So I felt like the premise of this was very, very cool. I liked the idea of her being able to speak to the dead. The first chapter was very cool because before she got the letter, she was doing this seance. She's mid-seance, and it was very interesting to kind of see, and it felt a little spooky, a little paranormal, and I really liked that aspect. And then it very slowly just kind of turned into a mystery that you can easily tell what is happening. I don't know if the author was trying to make it as easy to be able to pick up on the thriller aspects of it, of the whodunit, but I mean, within 30 pages I had already quite figured it out. You know, it is a little sad at times, but I just felt like this book had a really great premise. It just wasn't executed the way that I personally would have enjoyed. I gave it a 2 stars overall because I didn't hate it, I just didn't love it. It just wasn't something that grabbed my attention. I wasn't trying to read it at night. I was like, okay, I don't really care, but I just want to finish it. And it's so unfortunate because when you see a book like this, the cover is so gorgeous. I just wasn't a fan. And I know this author also wrote The Lost Apothecary, which I had on my TBR, and I was very excited to read this book to kind of get a feel for her writing, but I've since been like, you know what, I'm okay. This just wasn't up to what I wanted it to be. I've also heard a lot of negative reviews about The Lost Apothecary, so I'm like, you know what, I'm okay. I feel like a lot of people probably understand and agree with me. I think this had a really great female-female romance in it, but it just wasn't what I wanted from it. It just wasn't what I wanted, and I felt like the storyline just absolutely dragged. It was a very slow build-up to something that was, you could easily pick out what had happened within 30 pages. So I did read the London Seance Society. Yeah, overall 2 stars, wasn't my favorite. Next book I read, another 5-star of the year. easily. This was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. So I have read House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, and I almost feel like my opinion of it was kind of lightly tainted. So I read it as a part of a book club, and it was, funnily enough, my pick. I had never read any Riley Sager before. At the time, House Across the Lake was all the rage. I wanted to read it, so I suggested it to the book club, and a lot of people in the book club didn't like it, and I feel like my review and my opinion of it was slightly tainted because of that. But now when I look back and I think about that book, I'm like, that book was awesome. It had a great twist. It was super fun and engaging, and I really like Riley Sager's writing. So I picked up Home Before Dark, and this was easily, out of all of the horror books I've read as an adult, the scariest. It genuinely scared me, and I know horror is very different for very different people. I'm going to talk about another horror book here in a little, but I know that certain types of horror scare people and that type may not scare other people. So for me, paranormal, haunted house stuff definitely gets me, and this book was so spooky, scary. I loved every single second of it. I gave it 5 stars overall. So this is about a woman named Maggie who 25 years ago lived through a haunted house situation. Think Haunting of Hill House, think Amityville Horror, think like very scary paranormal things are happening, they have to leave, they abandon the house. So she lived through this like scary situation in this place called Baneberry Hall, and she has blocked it out. She doesn't remember a single thing about it, and her dad actually wrote like essentially an Amityville Horror book about it, like a documentary almost about what happened to them and their experience and like what happened in the haunting of the house. So in this book, every chapter it flips back and forth. So you are reading her dad's story, and then the next chapter you're 25 years later as she's coming back to this house. So she has to come back to the house because her dad passes away and he gives her the house. She's like, we still have this? Yes, they still own the house. So she's going because she's like, this place is not haunted. Like, this is not, like, she blocked it all out. She's hated this book all her life. It's only caused her strife. People have always been like, oh, that's that girl that lived through the haunting. It's always just been like a problem in her life, but she doesn't really remember any of it. So when people ask her about it, she's like, yeah, I really don't know. I blacked out. So you're reading the story about what is happening, the story her dad wrote, like it's like a book, and then you're reading her going back 25 years later because she's going to renovate it. She wants to sell it. She wants to get rid of it. She just doesn't want it to be a problem anymore. So the book that her dad writes is so spooky to me. There are characters that are so scary and things that happen that I was just like, it just very gave me Haunting of Hill House vibes. I loved every second of it. And then her coming back and also experiencing things, incredible all around. If you get scared easily, don't read this. But this was just like, I was very scared while reading this, but I could not put it down because I needed to know the end. I needed to know what happened. And then the whole, like, sometimes I feel like horror books, it's very difficult to wrap them up. An author usually has a pretty difficult time kind of like tying everything together, at least from what I've read. I thought the ending was incredible. It was wrapped up so, dare I say beautifully? I'm gonna say beautifully. It was wrapped up so beautifully. The actual of like what happened, 10 times scarier than I could have imagined. It was just so good. I really liked this. I loved the flipping back and forth between the dad and the daughter and like what happened, and it's so good. There's like a history with the house. It's just, I really enjoyed this. Immediately upon finishing, I went and picked up 2 more Riley Sager books because I absolutely love his writing. He just came out with a new book that I'm itching to pick up, but this was fantastic. Home Before Dark, fantastic. 5 stars. I enjoyed every second of this. Usually when I finish a book at night, I like to just come back into my office, put it away, grab a new one. I like refused to leave my room. I was like, I'm just gonna stay in bed. I'm a little scared. It was so good. I really enjoyed that one. Okay, our last kind of book of the month was unfortunately my April book of the month, which was Camp Zero. This is Camp Zero by Michelle Min Sterling. This was a debut novel, and I feel genuinely kind of bad sometimes when I talk crap about books, because, like, you know, an author puts a lot of their time and energy into things, but I I don't know, I guess we all have opinions, you know? So I chose Camp Zero because it was described as a dystopian, which it is. And I haven't seen a dystopian on Book of the Month, and I was like, I liked reading dystopians as a kid. Let me pick this one up. And the premise sounded amazing. The cover is fantastic. This was a great, like, it sounded really great. It was sold really well to me. So this book, kind of hard to describe, and that's kind of how I feel about it. I gave it 1 star, in case you're curious. So you are following 3 different point of views. This book is 300 pages. It is so teeny tiny. 3 point of views. You're following Rose, who is called a Bloom, and a Bloom is a person who is essentially a sex worker who is brought to different settlements because this is in, I think, the year 2053. The climate falling apart. Everyone's basically trying to move as far north as possible to get to as cold as possible because everything else is a wasteland. So blooms, or yeah, essentially are sex workers who come to areas to, you know, work and take care of people that work in like architecture, the engineers, the people in charge of kind of designing these new settlements. So she's a Bloom, just moved to, like, I think it's like northern Canada. And then you're following her. You're following, I think the name is Grant. You're also following Grant, who is kind of how I want to describe as like a young guy straight out of college who's trying to leave his family and his family name behind because his family name is huge and known everywhere, and he just wants to be his own person, who has also come up to this settlement to work under the architect that Rose is working for as well. And then you're also following White Alice, and White Alice is a group of women who are I think military is how it's kind of described, who are doing some sort of mission, but they're outside of this Camp Zero, this settlement, and they've been there for years. And you're following various timelines. It's kind of confusing, but it does make sense. But that's where I guess my niceness comes out, because this book was so slow. It was 300 pages and it took me a week to read, which is ridiculous. I kept falling asleep every time I read it. It was just too much of an info dump. There was way too much information, not enough dialogue, not enough anything happening. You're just getting more and more information about why this settlement is here, what's going on with it, what's going on with everything else. Then you're getting all these like backstories about different people that like just, it doesn't matter. Why Rose is there, why Grant's there. And I guess it kind of makes sense because when you get to the last like 50 pages of this book, things start happening, and the last 50 pages is when the story actually starts to get a little bit interesting. But I feel like once you read 250 pages and there's 50 pages left, like, why does all of the action happen at the end? It didn't make any sense to me. I felt like I get why it was considered a dystopian because it was in the future and the climate and everything, but it wasn't as captivating, as thrilling as I wanted it to be. It was very info dump, not a lot of anything really happening, like I said, towards the end. And then the end, of course, left on some sort of like weird cliffhanger where you know there's going to be a second book. But I just don't care to pick it up. I just didn't like this one at all. I gave it a 1 star because I just don't care. It was okay. It was fine. I just would not recommend. Not great. To sort of get me out of my reading slump, because that one definitely put me in a reading slump, which was so disappointing because right before that I had read Home Before Dark, which I loved. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna jump back into a series, into something that I know that I'm going to enjoy. So I picked up the second book in the Finlay Donovan series, which has been officially announced as a series, which is kind of exciting. There's only 3 books out so far, but this is the second. This is Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead. I have read Finlay Donovan is killing it, obviously. And if you haven't heard me talk about it, essentially Finlay Donovan is a single mom. She's a writer. She's writing her next book in the first book, and she's talking to like her editor, her manager, whomever, and she's just explaining it. And her books are about like, I don't know, like detective stuff. And so she's explaining it in like a Panera Bread, and a woman overhears her and assumes that Finlay Donovan is a hitman and hires her to kill her husband. And it just becomes a whole like fun, not necessarily, I want to say cozy mystery, but it's a little bit more fun and thrilling than that. I just feel like it's really fun to read. So Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead is just another continuation of that story. In this book, someone wants her ex-husband dead, and that's clearly a problem because he's the dad of her children. And this is just fun. Like, this one I think is also just as fun. I really like the friendship in this. I think her and her friend Vero are just like, I don't know, they're just so fun, and I just love their like commentary. And I like Finlay a lot. I like being in her head. I like the sort of romantic triangle she's in. I think that's just awesome. And yeah, I really liked this. This was a great time. Like I said, this was about a continuation. Like, I think it picks up essentially right where the last one picked off, about someone wanting her husband dead, or her ex-husband dead. Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead, I gave a 4-star just because I really loved it and it was just fun, and I'm really excited to read the next one in the series. All right, and then the last book that I read in April was another horror novel. I kind of did a random number generator just to see what to read out of my physical TBR stack, because I didn't know what I was in the mood for, and it picked Grady Hendrix' How to Sell a Haunted House, which is funny because I was initially going to read this one right after Home Before Dark, but I was like, oh wait, I don't know if I want to read 2 haunted house books back to back. But I did end up reading this in the month of April, and this was fun. So I really do enjoy Grady Hendrix. He is considered a horror author, but I personally don't find his stories scary. However, like I said before, you might find them scary. This one is about this girl Louise, who finds out that her parents tragically passed and she needs to go back to her hometown to kind of do the funeral and then like renovate and sell their house. And her brother is also coming. Her and her brother have a very like separated relationship. They're essentially estranged. They don't talk, they don't get along, they never got along basically their entire lives. There's definitely snippets in here of them as kids not getting along, so she has to kind of go together with her brother to sell this house, and it's obviously a problem because they're fighting the whole time. It's just kind of an issue. And they go into this house, and her mom used to do like puppet shows, so their house is filled with like dolls and puppets, which is very creepy. But obviously, like, to me it wasn't like super creepy. That's not something that scares me too much, but it could be creepy for you. But her house is like filled top to bottom with puppets and dolls, and one of the puppets, Pupkin, who is a clown, is the leader of the dolls, and things start happening. Things start getting creepy. There's a lot of very like graphic, creepy scenes in this that I definitely was cringing at, but like cringing like, oh, that sounds painful, not like cringing like it was bad. Well, maybe it was, but it didn't feel like it was. So lots of things are happening. They're trying to figure out like what to do, how to take care of this puppet. They're realizing that the puppet has been around their entire lives. Like, their mom even knew about it and kind of kept it from them. And yeah, they're just basically trying to deal with this possessed puppet, and it's scary. And yeah, I gave it a 3 stars just because personally this was like 400 pages. I felt like this was 100 pages too long. Right when I thought the story had ended, I looked and I had 100 pages left, and I was like, huh? And then it picked right back up again, but I was like, that's weird. It totally could have ended at that part. If y'all know what I'm talking about, if you read this book, you know what part I'm talking about. It could have ended there, but it definitely kept going, which I think was also a little scary, but then you get like a really good backstory, of course. This was fun. I think out of all of Grady Hendrix books that I've read so far, this is probably not my favorite, but it's also not my least favorite. It was a good time. It was a fun experience. This is his newest book. And if you haven't read it and you are a Grady Hendrix fan, I do suggest it because it is a fun read, but it is quite long. So I did give this 3 stars because I enjoyed it, but I didn't like love it the way that I loved Home Before Dark, but it was a good time. So those are all 5 books that I read in April. I feel like I had a pretty good reading month. I'm thankful to be out of my reading slump that those 2 book of the month books unfortunately put me in, but at least I was able to pick myself back up and pick out some more books that I was happy about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.